Good evening and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. Let's go ahead and get started with a quick intro here from, well, President Zelensky here. I believe he was speaking, doing an interview with French media here. So the language, I believe, is French, based on what little I know. So let me go ahead and just read the subtitles for you as we go. That is assuming I can get the video to play at this point. For us, a loss is to lose our country. It's different for everyone. Some will ask, what is more important for you, territory or people? How can you equate these? It's all about the people. People are important, but it doesn't mean we can gift them 30% of our land. First, it's our land. Secondly, who says they won't go further? They were. Who said a frozen conflict would work? It was already frozen. Who said Putin does not simply want us destroyed? He does. He wants a return of the USSR under his control until the end of his days. That's this person's plan. And if he sacrificed 500,000 people of his country, who said he wouldn't want to kill another million of us, if he didn't spare 500,000 of his own people, how can this person be trusted? I don't think so. Thus, it must be well calculated. Therefore, what is a loss for me? This isn't football. It's a serious situation, not a game. That's the long story short from President Zelensky. If Vladimir Putin isn't afraid to lose 500,000 of his own people, why would he care about 1 million Ukrainians? Why would he stop? Especially if he thinks he's winning. It's about the power. It's about the status. It's about the resurrection of the old Soviet Union. It's about the restoration of imperial glory. And this is where I think the West misses it. They miss this idea because many of us in the West have set aside the idea of imperial glory, of colonization, of capturing territory that isn't ours and then keeping it. In fact, it's gotten to the point where we have been so conditioned to believe this that we have managed to actually stop preparing for war. But the thing is, our enemies have not stopped preparing. All right, so let's go ahead and get moving along here. That was President Zelensky. Let's talk about Hungary for a little bit. And as you'll recall from yesterday, Ukraine had put in sanctions against Lukoil, who was sending Russian oil through Ukrainian pipelines to Hungary and Serbia. Slovakia, I think instead. Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico criticized Ukraine's sanctions against the Russian oil company Lukoil. During a phone call with Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, Fico called the sanctions senseless, arguing that they harm some EU countries more than Russia. He stated that Slovakia does not intend to be a hostage to Ukrainian-Russian relations, and that the Ukrainian president's decision means Slovakia's Slovnaft refinery will receive 40% less oil than needed for processing. Lukoil has been under limited sanctions in Ukraine since 2018, but in June 2024, the sanctions were significantly expanded to include a transit ban. And that's the situation, the top layer of the situation. You see, Ukraine has sanctioned Lukoil, which is how Russia's getting money, is by selling their oil and products. Well, of course, we can already tell this isn't going over well with Hungary and Slovakia. They are consulting with the European Commission regarding Ukraine's suspension of oil transit from Russia. According to the governments of these countries, this decision by Ukraine violates the association agreement with the EU. Well, there is one little detail I want to point out. Right now, Ukraine is not in the EU. And therefore, how much authority does the EU have to force Ukraine to do what they wish? I would contend none. In fact, the Hungary has stated that they may just stop providing electricity to Ukraine because of this halt of Russian oil. The Hungarian government does view this as a way to destabilize Hungary and Slovakia. And, well, I mean, to put it simply, they've had how long to figure this out? They've known for at least 2 years plus that the transit of oil through Ukraine for them would be a problem. Other countries have gotten off Russian oil. But you notice that the ones that are really friendly with Vladimir Putin have not. This is their mistake. This is they had the opportunity. They had the years of fat harvests where they could have easily laid up in store and prepared, got an alternate suppliers. And now that the years of famine are upon them, they have nothing left in their warehouses. They have no food left. They have no oil left. And it's their fault for not preparing. They knew this was coming. And that's the situation with Hungary and Slovakia. The kind of the most, I would say, interesting part of today's news was that a lot more to talk about. But before I do want to say thank you to Al, Jerry, Lucille, Ozzy, and everyone else that is tuning in, because you guys aren't the only ones according to the numbers here. And I do absolutely appreciate you being here. If you're here and haven't sounded off yet, please let me know you're here. I'd love to see who you are. And on top of that, I do want to say I appreciate every one of your comments. Keep them coming. I love it. Okay, so President Zelensky has been making some commentary that is interesting. We can end the hot stage of the war before the end of this year. It doesn't mean that all territories must be recaptured, but we must be strong on the battlefield. We need to take steps to force it to retreat. This will give us better position at the negotiating table. Translation. They're looking at the situation in the U.S., the politics in the U.S., and they're saying they want to be in a better position. You see, one thing that Donald Trump wants to be, he wants to be on the winner's side. And if at the moment that they try to make a deal, Ukraine is winning, that will make a huge difference because Donald Trump will want to be on the winning side. That's just how he thinks. Of course, there's a lot of things about presidential politics. We'll try and talk about that maybe towards the end of the video today. By the way, Robbie, glad to see you here. Always glad to have you as well. And I appreciate it every single time. Let your family know that I've been thinking about them. Hope they're doing well. Moving on. This story is interesting right here. Photographers Olha Kovyalova and Vladislav Krasnoshuk were under Russian fire in the Toretsk direction. Now, Toretsk is one of the areas that's been very active recently. And so these photographers are out there recording the work of Ukrainian artillerymen and the various other military actions. Their dugout was hit by Russia. Olia received a shrapnel wound to the arm and, an external fracture. All the others in the dugout suffered shell shocks. The journalists and the photographers do such important and amazing work in showing the world the truth about Russia's horrible war against Ukraine. And this is where I come to this interesting statement I see every once in a while. Well, if there's a war going on in Ukraine, how come we don't have correspondents there? How come we don't have the news journalists there every second of every day showing us exactly what's going on, talking about every aspect of the war? Well, it's their fault for not looking. If you don't open your eyes, you'll never see the footage come out. And I've gone through enough of this to know that all you have to do is spend a couple of minutes on Twitter or on Telegram or on even on Facebook to a certain extent. And even, the AP News is okay sometimes. But the major news organizations have moved on to the next big thing in the U.S. They've got the election season. They've got other things going on. But if you look at those who are involved in the conflict, they are providing the journalistic excellence that will be basically the definitive record of what happened in the Ukraine war when everything is said and done. Interesting little story here. You can winter with our windows. It is much cheaper than glass and safer in war conditions. Volunteers of the Insulate Ukraine Foundation replace windows broken in houses with temporary windows made of plastic and polyethylene free of charge. In addition to helping residents of the destroyed houses to survive winter, such windows are also, quote, virtually indestructible from explosions and do not threaten with shrapnel. Now, from my experience, these types of polyethylene windows still can become quite shrapnelish, if I can make up a quick word. But they do tend to be larger pieces and lighter weight than glass. So even if you get a close explosion, obviously they're not going to take a direct hit at all. But at least if you get a close explosion, you're far less likely to have dangerous shrapnel flying around. President Zelensky made a bunch of comments in this interview that he did. No one will agree to a war that will last for many years. There will even be more casualties. This cannot be allowed. But if the war does drag on, we will need to find some solution to hold elections. That's part of why I believe he's looking at ending the active phase of the war, at least for a period, by the end of end of the year. Man, I just totally changed the entire nature of that one, didn't I? Anyway, but he's looking to at least come to a temporary lull in activities, enough that they can carry out elections. I hate to say it, but I suspect President Zelensky's getting a little tired. And you can see it on his face. And probably as much as he loves the people of Ukraine, and I think that's been clear all throughout, he still needs to make sure they are taken care of in all respects, including the opportunity to elect new public officials. Not easy, especially with the way their constitution is written. It's just a concern. You know, it's an attack point that the Russians are using right now. I don't consider it valid, but it is still in a place that they're attacking. And there will be plenty of people who will jump in the middle of that with that claim at the same time. Just wait till I get to the part about churches later on. Now, Ukraine did manage to restructure their debt with key bondholders. That's an $11.4 billion savings that will help them over their defense for the next 3 years. So that's good news for Ukraine, at least. Glad to see you, Lil Strawn. Always glad to have you on board, of course. Lucille states it's harder than that. There's so much noise, it's really difficult to know what's true. And then she gives me a compliment there. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. From Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi, he said that the new methods for destroying Russian reconnaissance drones are being developed and mastered, focusing on electronic warfare and FPV drones due to a, quote, severe shortage of short-range anti-aircraft missiles. The typical Patriots are quite valuable, and they be more importantly dedicated to the larger items that need to be intercepted. They've been making a lot of creative ways to overcome the drone issue. Everything from mounting 50 calibers on the back of a pickup truck, all the way to finding new ways. In fact, there is an American, I believe it's called the Hawk system or Havoc system. I'm not sure what it's called, but basically they have laser guided rockets that they fire at the drones, and they guide it to the target with a laser. And so that anything they can do to stretch their air defense capabilities even farther. Always impressive. Let's go ahead and move over to the news out of Russia. Now, I did mention the other day the strike on Morozovsk Air Base, and we've gotten a little bit more information. There might be more, I think later, some of these links are kind of mixed up here. but there was a destroyed maintenance hangar and possibly some planes. I believe the fuel depot was also hit on this one. I'm going from other information I've picked up elsewhere, and somebody claimed that there was an active use airplane that was impacted, though they didn't have a damage assessment. Now, this video shows a Ukrainian drone going towards the Tuapse oil depot. Now, the explosion is not vast, but you tell me, do you see anything intercepting that drone? So far, I've seen nothing intercepting that drone, and it falls and explodes. A small explosion and no secondaries that are at least in the video. Whoops. What happened there? Get and see my desktop for a second or two here. All right, let's close that. Now, this one I want to talk about because it's interesting. The thing is that while I've seen it from a couple of different sources, they've all been Western sources. I don't have the confirmation from Russian sources. But Rosgvardia, the Russian equivalent of the National Guard, is asking hunters in Kamchatka and Buryatia regions to turn in their rifles and ammo so they can be used in the invasion of Ukraine. People's Front political party is asking the same of residents in the Irkutsk region. A governor is asking the same in Komi region. Now, if this is true, why would they need to gather to get ammunition and rifles from their average citizens, their hunters? I mean, most hunters aren't going to have more than a few hundred rounds, if that, unless, of course, you're over here in the U.S., and then if they have anything less than a few thousand, that'd be shocking. But over here in Russia, they're going to have a small amount of ammunition. They're going to have rifles, but they're not going to have vast stores that will equip the assaults in Ukraine. And I think Aussie has just hit on it. This is not to equip the war in Ukraine, but to disarm their populace, because the political situation is getting tenuous over there in Russia. At least that's my theory at this point. Diesel fuel storage burned down in occupied North Ossetia in the Caucasus. Now, Ossetia is, I believe, part of Georgia, but one of the areas that Russia marched into and took over. For somebody who claims that they have done nothing, done no invading of other countries, they sure hold an awful lot of other countries' land. Russia does have a kind of an analog of Starlink, an alternate system that's not Starlink, but they say that it's really not that good. Constantly losing connection, bad quality. Of course, that looks like a regular like DirecTV satellite dish and all that kind of stuff. So whatever they've got, it's obviously not going to be up to the snuff of Starlink. Now, from Janis Kluge. When Russia started its full scale invasion, it had three major resources: huge stocks of old weapons, poor and unemployed men, super solid finances. And they did. They had finances that were extremely well placed. They had a large, I believe it was called the Wealth Fund, which is basically the rainy day fund, a large stockpile of money. And that is dwindling, if not gone by now. They had a whole bunch of poor and unemployed men. Now they are fighting to find just workers to work in their plants. They have a labor shortage and huge stocks of old weapons. Well, they're using those up as well. The Economist published an article about Russia running low on military equipment. But overall, as Giannis states, all three are not limitless, and the economic consequence of that is inflation. Inflation is the result of urgently ramping up military production, pulling men from the labor market, and sending them to the front, and from weakening trade and fiscal balances. So the question for Putin is more and more: guns or butter? War in Ukraine or a nice comfort zone for most Russians? That means, should he switch to a real war economy, as so far he has not, Should he do another round of mobilization? Raise taxes? We are actually seeing all three more and more, even if the change is gradual. This means that Russians will begin to feel the price of the war. How will Putin deal with it politically? Most likely with more of the same, more repression, more intense propaganda. Of course, Putin will not give up on his war just because his stocks of vehicles are dwindling, etc. But as a result, the war will transform Russia and affect the life of all Russians in an even more profound way than it has so far. And I have done enough research in the finances of Russia before the full scale invasion to know that they were actually in pretty good financial state. They could have been redistributing some of that money in order to do infrastructure projects, repairs, make their citizens' lives better. But they still had a very robust rainy day fund. Had a surplus in their budget. They literally had everything going for them. They were selling oil to Europe, by the barrel and by the hundreds of barrels. So they had money coming in, but they did not need to do this. You see, they almost had Europe over a barrel of oil. They almost had them addicted, and then they could have been dictating terms all day long. But by doing what they did, they instead have destroyed their wealth fund. They have raised their taxes. They've lost so many people. They could have done so much good with those funds, and yet they did not. This is the Russia they chose. Let's see. North Ossetia is part of Russia. South Ossetia was part of Georgia, occupied by Russia since 2008. Yes, that's correct. Ossetites are unusual in that area, speak a language related to Persian, Orthodox Christians, and not liked by their English neighbors whose lands they took. Ossets always collaborate with Russia. Remember the Besla school massacre that was in North Ossetia and carried out by English. Okay, well, good to know. A lot of context there from Ozzy. Now, let's see. Russia's claimed they want to set up a sanitary zone multiple times now that they were planning to set up in Kharkiv Oblast over there. However, more and more it's looking like this sanitary zone is taking place in Russia. Murom Belgorod Sanitary Zone, as Dmitry at War Translated states, a town of 1,500 residents, is now completely empty due to Putin's failed Kharkiv offensive. Residents abandoned the town, complaining that no one protected them. Interesting. Ozzy, I'll deal with the spelling errors, and it won't bother me in the slightest. I appreciate the comments and the information. You are awesome. Russian telegram channels also report a drone attack on Morozovsk, Rostov region of Russia. A military airfield is located there. We talked about Morozovsk briefly before. This is more of the drone videos showing up, showing this attack taking place. Ukraine is getting their drone work really going pretty well. So overall, I'm pretty glad to see that's happening. Now, let's talk about this one for just a moment here. By the way, Bobby Joe Brown, you can say that if you'd like, but I'm glad to have you on the stream anyway. Another example of Russia's systematic policy of discrimination against Ukrainians on the basis of nationality under occupation. Metropolitan Clement said that the last Ukrainian church is being dismantled in occupied Crimea. The occupying city authorities of Yevpatoria have begun dismantling the Holy Cross Church of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Now, he goes into the legal aspects of this, but I'm not going to bother. Because one of the things the Russians have claimed all along is that Ukraine was discriminating against Christians. They were oppressing Christians. No, what they were doing is they were kicking FSB agents out of their country. Because the church in question, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate, I believe is the correct term, was basically an FSB front job. On the contrary, the Russians are dismantling churches that the Ukrainians had set up. Now, just because it says Ukrainian Orthodox Church, or in this case, let me see, the Holy Cross Church of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, does not mean that it's all about Ukraine. You're not going to find, well, you might find, but you probably aren't going to have the standing intelligence operatives running the show over there. Unfortunately, the FSB does not consider that a defense. I guess they believe if they are going to do it, so is the other side. These are satellite images of the Milorova airfield that we mentioned a few days ago as well. There are fires on the site, including those of a technical and operational unit and a warehouse of fuels and lubricants. So the strike may not have impacted directly military jets and things like that, but may have taken out the fuel, the lubricants, and the technical repair facilities that were operating the airfield. Having to get everything retranslated again. Now, the Russians have tripled government spending on cemetery expansion. In 2023, Russian regions spent more than 225 million rubles on expanding cemeteries. This is twice as much as in 2022 and 6 times more than in 2020, according to the Moscow Times. During the coronavirus pandemic, the number of deaths jumped by 35%. However, even this did not provoke such an expansion of cemeteries as the special military operation. This is where you start seeing the rubber hit the road. This is where you start seeing the real facts. And the fact is that Russia's having to expand these cemeteries because they are losing that many people. Now, in full disclosure here, Ukraine's had to expand plenty of cemeteries as well. This is war. But you ever notice how everybody says that Ukraine should stop fighting? That if they stop fighting, the dying would stop? But nobody ever says if the Russians would stop fighting, the dying would stop. Nobody ever says those poor Russian boys, if they would just go home, they wouldn't be dead. It's a double standard is what it is. From the Ministry of Defense of the UK, the latest defense intelligence update, it is highly likely that over 30,000 Rosgvardia, or Russian National Guard personnel, are currently deployed to Ukraine. The majority of Rosgvardia's personnel are almost certainly conducting near-area security operations, with only a few units engaging in frontline fighting. Rosgvardia's premier combat unit, the 116th Special Purpose Brigade, highly likely consists of 3 regiments of troops with access to tanks, infantry, fighting vehicles, and artillery. Since the start of 2024, Rosgvardia has almost certainly attempted to increase its frontline forces through absorbing Russian irregular formations. Rosgvardia successfully integrated the Donetsk People's Republic's Vostok Battalion into its ranks during May 2024. It's highly likely that the anticipated agreement for Wagner forces to serve under Rosgvardia's 1st Volunteer Corps broke down in March 2024. Now, I've seen several other aspects of this mentioned specifically that these tend to be irregular troops, poorly trained, if trained at all. So they're absorbing poorly trained troops to replace their losses on the battlefield. Residents of several villages in the Stavropol region appealed to Putin after being without water for 2 weeks due to a lack of funding. They report that livestock and poultry are dying, and they struggle with basic needs like bathing children and washing clothes. Despite receiving some drinking water, it is dirty and chlorinated, and the limited supply of technical water is insufficient. The local water utility stated there is no funding for restoration, promising water by 2025. Although the local administration claimed to have restored water supply following the appeal, residents report this is not true. Strange, it would seem like that Russia would be able to invest some of that money in their infrastructure instead of into blowing people up. Okay, this is more about the Morozk airfield here, possibly a Su-34 jet being hit. And it was an active one and not stationary. Things kind of got a little bit mixed up today as I was getting things done. So thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see. Now, this is from Anton Herashchenko. Let's see. Pause here. Ozzy says, the Tsar will fix things if he is informed. The thought patterns remain the same since Tsarist times. Good Tsar must be must be the fault of a bad boyar. Got it. Sorry, I just typed something in there so I could see the rest of the comment. On my screen, it gets hidden behind a little heart here, which, well, I'd love to give you guys lots and lots of hearts. It's just it's a little bit tying me up to mess with the hearts while I'm trying to talk to you guys. Mysterious buyers with suspected links to Russia have begun amassing dozens of vessels capable of carrying liquefied natural gas. This suggests that Russia is expanding its dark fleet of energy tankers. This, according to the Financial Times. Over the past year, several previously unknown companies, mainly registered in the United Arab Emirates, have rapidly acquired LNG vessels, driving up market prices, particularly for older ships. Since quarter two 2023, more than 50 LNG vessels have changed ownership to UAE-based companies, according to Windward. Ship tracking group Kipler says the developments in the LNG tanker market point to a complex network of maritime operations potentially linked to Russian interests. The long story short, Russia's trying to build up its shadow fleet because they've started to increasingly come under Western sanctions. They have been noted, they've been pinpointed, and gradually those tankers are being either removed from effective use because they are watched so carefully, or outright seized. There's been some of that as well. Then there's Abdi Aladunov, the commander of the Akhmat Special Forces, promised to restore order in Armenia and bring it back to Russia. We have to make Armenia go back home to Russia. Now, Armenia was an ally of Russia for a very long time. They realized that Russia wasn't going to do anything for them, so they started kind of working their way towards the west. Of course, Azerbaijan was Azerbaijan feels wrong. I'll think about that for a while. Their neighbor's been busy trying to invade them and mess around with them, and that whole situation is complicated. I'm not going to assume that I know enough to be able to give the full summary of that. But Armenia has been desperate for good, solid allies for years, and they have been finding it in the West, with the U.S. and with other nations. And Russia eventually said basically, we're out. And now they're talking about going back again. Armenia better be concerned. Thanks to the Czech initiative, 100,000 munitions will be delivered to Ukraine during July and August, according to the Czech foreign minister, whose name I will not bother trying to pronounce. That's good news. That's Ukraine can use every bit that they can get. My understanding is that they still have a shortage of artillery shells. They're not able to fire near as many as Russia is. With any luck, those are still more precise than what Russia's using. Still, there is a certain quality to quantity. Ozzy states, what was the final straw on Armenia was when it was discovered Belarus had been arming Azerbaijan. Exactly. The Russians had been working with Azerbaijan to invade Armenia, kind of getting their little palace coup situation over there. And I just don't. I've done a little bit of research on it. I know the surface level stuff, but I don't know all the deep details on it. So we mentioned a while back that there was a new NATO base being built in Romania. Well, U.S. B-52 bombers have landed for the first time at the NATO main Eastern Air Base in Romania. On the way, the American Stratofortress planes flew above the Barents Sea to point-blank cruise missile range of the main airbase used by Russia for its own bomber strikes against Ukraine. And when they say point-blank cruise missile range, they are not joking. I mean, anything they would be launching from those types of ranges would be basically arriving before the Russians would know what hit them. A little bit of a reminder as to who's got the big stuff around here. The fact that we've got a NATO air base in Romania is a miracle in and of itself. All possible because Russia got a little too big for its britches and decided to go marching into its neighbors, making its neighbors join NATO. 3 Serbian weapons factory engineers have been arrested, accused of spying for foreign organizations. The accused are all current or former employees at the state-owned Krusik factory, which manufactures weapons and ammunition, including 155mm artillery shells. So, I'm not sure who are they supposed to be spying for? I mean, unless they're spying for Russia, but Serbia is kind of Russia's ally. I'm not clear on exactly who they think they're spying for, because the U.S. will know all about 155mm artillery shells. It's not like they need to know about that. Then there's this one. China is providing Russia with satellite reconnaissance information for its war against Ukraine, according to Bloomberg, so not being made up by Knoll reports. Head Aerospace supplies Russia with data from over 100 Chinese satellites. As Knoll report states, masks are off, boycott China. Let's cut to the chase. China's working with all the people that are our enemies. China's making themselves our enemy by working with our enemies. Latvia shipped over 500 drones to Ukraine as part of the drone coalition. That's a pretty nice little chunk of drones. They'll be very useful on the battlefield. Then there's the Institute for the Study of War, and they're talking about some of Russia's more foreign items here. The Russian State Duma chairperson Vyacheslav Volodin recently visited Nicaragua and Cuba, likely as part of ongoing Kremlin efforts to project its influence in the Western Hemisphere and rally states against the U.S. and the West. They're trying desperately to create this multipolar world where Russia has got far more authority than they actually merit, for lack of a better way to say it. Volodin's visits to Nicaragua and Cuba immediately followed Belarusian Prime Minister Roman Golochevenko's visits to Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, during which Golochevenko signed multiple bilateral economic and trade agreements, possibly as part of Russian schemes that use Belarus to help Russia evade Western sanctions. The Georgian State Security Service also reportedly summoned several Georgian citizens who had served as volunteers alongside Ukrainian forces for questioning on charges of, quote, conspiracy to overthrow the government and terrorism. So the Russians are pulling out the stops, is what I'm trying to say on that one. Not a lot on the front lines today. Let's go ahead and go right on through it. Not a ton here. It's relatively quiet. In fact, Knoll reports for the last 2 days, no significant or confirmed frontline changes. So War Gonzo reports on the Zaporizhia front, no significant changes. Donetsk front, it's basically the exact same thing they said yesterday. So no real changes. With heavy fighting in Krasnohorivka, Karlivka, and a very tight Ukrainian defense. So a lot of things they're saying. Even War Gonzo is saying that Russia is gaining every one of its advances through the use of a lot of soldiers in their lives. Chasiv Yar, no significant changes. Kharkiv, counterfighting continues in Volchansk, and with Russian aircraft actively targeting Ukrainian positions. Now, I've got to think. I think I saw something on the other areas around Kharkiv. Give me a moment here. I'll see what we can find. By the way, Russia continues to use Crimea as their launching platform for Shahed drones and for other missiles and things like that. In this case, they mentioned that there was a major launch from the Karan Heights with the drones flying over one of the villages and the general area where it came from, in the area of the entrance to Sevastopol Bay. And then they moved over the sea. Now, the armed forces of Ukraine reported shooting down 35 of 39. Now, the interesting thing there really is the fact that whenever Ukraine reports shooting down something, they give a reasonable number. It's never, sometimes it is, but it's almost never, we shot down 100% of everything that was launched at us. They shot down most of it, and they're honest about that. It's a major difference in what you can rely on from them. There we go. Heavy fighting is currently taking place in the village of Hlybok in the Kharkiv region. And this is how Hlybok looks now. You see, this is starting to look just like about every other town that Russia has visited in Ukraine these days, getting gradually decimated. And we'll end off with the deep state map here, at least for the front lines. They say that there was an advance near Pishini, which is, get that pulled out a bit, outside of let's see. Okay, so yeah, basically south of Serbianki forestry area, in that area there. Let's see if we can get the. I can hardly wait till I get home and back on my regular computer. This will be so much easier to do. There's a small advance here. You can see it's just kind of sticking across a couple roads, kind of an unusual way southwest of New York. I think Mikulski. Okay, more advances in the Vodiane area, right over here. Like I said, I can hardly wait till I get home and can actually use an actual computer for these updates. And that's everything on the front lines and basically the end of the direct news out of Ukraine. There are some other things that we can quickly discuss here as the interesting extras of the day. For instance, this one. President Biden has announced that he will not seek re-election in this campaign season. He did later endorse Kamala Harris to be his replacement. This letter, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but understand that there are some reasons to believe that it may not have been written directly by Joe Biden. Number one, it's not on presidential letterhead or campaign letterhead. The signature appears to be one of his machine signatures. He does promise to speak to the nation later in the week to discuss the issues. The last I heard, Joe Biden was diagnosed with a new variant of, well, not new variant, but one of the COVID-19 variants, and well, he's not been seen since. So there's many things to wonder about right here, and we're keeping an eye on it. The conversation about who could be his replacement is going to be long, extensive. Everybody's going to have their favorite person or least favorite. And overall, I'm seeing a lot of speculation. The questions about VP is Kamala going to just take on a VP? That's easy to find. The thing is, they've still got several weeks before the Democrat National Convention. So they may be trial ballooning Kamala Harris to see if she can start pulling in some positive numbers. They're already trying, because I've seen from major, I will just say there, individuals who are partisan on the Democrat side have been talking up how amazing Kamala Harris is, how presidential she is, and how capable she is overall. Oh, my phone just timed out here. Give me a second. And the overall result is kind of this insincere feeling I keep getting, because she is not that popular in the wider sense. But we're going to just have to watch this as it goes. I can't really speak to it in a long form right now. I've been watching a lot of the commentary on it. But just understand that Joe Biden has dropped out of the race. This is from the Great Wall of China here. You can see that wind is quite powerful, really good at flipping around the fabric of people are wearing and their coats and things like that. As Chris O states, I guess the Great Wall of China isn't any better at keeping out bad weather than it was at keeping out invaders. Now, this is kind of just an interesting one. You kind of watch the video here. This group of Ukrainian servicemen from the 24th Brigade are not shaken at all when a rocket-propelled grenade hits their trench. so long as it's not a Fab 500 bomb. Otherwise, they'd have to explain why they were missing for so long. The idea of having their trench hit with a rocket propelled grenade is so uninteresting. I mean, for lack of a better way, they're just casual about it. I imagine it's because after this long at war, they're immune to the thought. Kind of scary that young men are having to go through that. Here's the footage of the Vampire SAM system, which is the one I was talking about earlier that I couldn't remember the name of. This is using laser-guided APKWS rockets to intercept the Shahed drones. And as I understand, they have to be manually, kept on target with the laser. So the laser's not auto-tracking, from my understanding. So all they got to do is just guide it into the drone, and flop, there you go. Knocks that drone right out of the sky, blows it up, super nice. And this one, I wanted to go through this article in detail. I'm going to save it for, I think, later. How Putin's Russia misleads the right, meaning the conservative right. American Christians and conservatives have been fooled by Putin's strongman posture, mistaking ruthlessness for moral fortitude. This miscalculation could spell disaster for the U.S. And that's kind of the issue I'm seeing on a regular basis at this point in time. It's looking at a strong man, somebody who is strong and powerful and all this kind of stuff. That does not make them righteous. It doesn't make them right either. It doesn't make their actions just or even logical. The most powerful men are the ones that have the ability to carry out great violence, but have the moral fortitude to keep themselves in check, to save that ability for the times when it is vital for the protection of their families, their homes, their country, and their God. What Vladimir Putin is doing is not just. It's not righteous. It's not supporting conservative or right-wing or positive thought. What it's doing is chasing after power. Nothing more, nothing less. That is the Putin strongman, the one that certain members of the political right, and to be brutally honest, some members of the political left as well, who've been supporting Russia for much longer than the political right has. This is what they're mistaking. They're mistaking this idea of powerful, meaning they're righteous or just or good. But as we see in history, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Vladimir Putin in Russia is absolute power. And boy, has it corrupted. And that's everything for today. And if you have any questions for me, absolutely drop them in. I'll try and answer them for you when we get the next stream going. Thanks again for joining me today. I appreciate every single one of you. Al, Ozzy, Lucille, Jerry, yes, even Bobby, but Robbie as well, and everybody else. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you being here. We're part of a little old family right here, I think, that talks about this. And we grow a little bit every once in a while, new edition, every once in a blue moon. But understand, this is about finding the best information, staying informed, staying on top of things, and then having the discussions that can show us what's really going on when nobody else is really providing that information in depth and in the way that we can here. So thank you very much for joining me today. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.